Great. We are definitely live. So, all right. Well, I'll go ahead and mute us, and then we'll come back right at noon. All right. We're at 1 minute. All right. We're about to go live. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Bridges Conversations. We are a broadcast of the Bridges Foundation in St. Louis, Missouri. We're an organization that for the past 35 years has offered a 19th annotation experience of the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola, and also training for those who wish to accompany others in that experience. So we do these almost monthly conversations with people in our own Bridges communities, as well as others in the larger Ignatian community. Today we are, first of all, hi, Mike. Good to see you.
Hey, Steve.
We're joined today by Mike Jordan Laskey. He's the Director of Communications at the Jesuit Conference of Canada, the United States. His team is responsible for things that perhaps many of you have already been aware of, such as the Jesuits.org website, their social media platforms, and he serves as one of the hosts of the AMDG Jesuit podcast with Eric Clayton. Previously, Mike was the Director of Life and Justice Ministries for the Diocese of Camden, New Jersey. He's worked in Catholic parish and nonprofit ministry. He's a writer. He's a speaker. He's the author of the book called The Ministry of Peace and Justice from Liturgical Press. And he's, are you still a sports columnist for the National Catholic Reporter?
I haven't written there in a while, but I've written a number of sports columns there over the last 10 years or so.
Oh, nice. So his writing has appeared in lots of different places, including America Magazine, Give Us This Day, U.S. Catholic, and others. So he has a master's degree in theology from the University of Notre Dame, where he also earned his bachelor's degree in English. And he lives with his wife and his kids in Maryland. We were just discussing that. So anyway, welcome. After all that, welcome again, Mike.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stephen. Happy New Year.
Yeah, thank you. You too. We have a few people watching and listening today, which is great. If you have questions as we go, please just pop them into the Facebook comment section, and I will see them, and we'll circle back to them when we can. Mike, tell us a little bit, just to get us going, about your own personal background, your family, where you were raised, how you were raised, and maybe a little bit about how you came from there to be kind of immersed in Ignatian spirituality and experience. I know as you have your own experience of the spiritual exercises.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me on, Steve. And so this year there was the big confluence of Christmas and Hanukkah. They were calling Christmaka, right? The first night of Hanukkah was Christmas, which reminded me, of growing up in a house. We called it a cashew house, another portmanteau, like Catholic Jewish combination, making us cashew. So I had a Catholic mom and a Jewish dad. We were raised Catholic, my two younger siblings and I. But we also, celebrated the big Jewish holidays and really grew to love that tradition. So faith was something that was really alive in our family in different ways. And our parish was really strong when I was a kid. Coming up through middle school and high school, we had a great youth minister who kind of made service, immersion, and then like reflection and conversation around experiences on the margins a central part of the youth ministry. And then I also found, in my dad's Jewish tradition, this emphasis on, they call it tikkun olam, repairing of the world, the strong kind of social justice heart of Reform Judaism. And so feeling kind of both of those, really feeling connected to both those traditions in work in social justice areas. And so that was kind of a big part of my youth. And then in my college time, I would, in the summers, I would go back to New Jersey, where I was from, and run those, like the same kind of summer service trips that I had been on as a kid. I led them for the high school kids coming up behind me, and just doing that when I felt like, oh, this is vocational for me to kind of work in ministry. And so from those experiences, went into grad school in a program where I worked at a parish in Wisconsin and earned a master's in theology. And then, since then I've worked always in kind of churchy things in a couple of parishes, again, the Diocese of Camden in New Jersey, right across from Philadelphia, as the social justice director there. And then 6 years ago, switched over to this communications work. I don't really have a formal comms or PR background. When I interviewed, I said that was true. I had always written and spoken, and I'm a millennial, so I know how to be on the internet. So I said I could see the internet as this great mission field for evangelizing, and they said, okay, that sounds good. And so I've been here 6 years now with the Jesuit Conference. My wife and I met in the grad program at Notre Dame. She was stationed in Delaware, and I was in Wisconsin. And she worked for Catholic Relief Services for 10 years and now as a consultant doing strategic planning for Catholic groups. So our dinner conversations are very specific. But
so how did you wait in the midst of all that? Or when was your first real exposure to Ignatian spirituality, the exercises? Did that come before you're actually going to work for them or as part of that?
Yeah, no, for sure. So my uncle was a Jesuit, and then he was a priest and the pastor of St. Ignatius Loyola in New York, among other things. And he left the Jesuits before I was born, but he was still, he still is living to this day and a beloved uncle of mine. So I knew who the Jesuits were. And then that youth ministry program I mentioned was very Ignatian. Our youth minister, who now works with the Jesuits too, a guy by the name of Sean Sanford, who runs a lot of young adult ministry on the East Coast. He was an alum of St. Joe's University, the Jesuit University in Philly. And so a lot of our programming was kind of Ignatian in spirit. We often would do a kind of examine style prayer at the end of our sessions without really necessarily knowing what it was. And then just someone, again, you're getting interested in theology and spirituality, then of course you're just finding Jim Martin's books and just like learning about like the great rich history. And then I participated in a program called the Contemplative Leaders in Action, which is mostly on the East Coast, but is spread to some Midwest and West Coast places as well, kind of for 25 to 35-year-old young adults to kind of take Ignatian principles and apply them to leadership and just kind of life in the world today. And so I did that program and then kind of subsequently participated in the 19th annotation as well. And so a lot of it has been learning on the job. And I love that the Jesuits really want people who work with them to get to know the charism and to throw themselves into it. And so to feel like, we have retreat time that we can take during the year. And I was doing the 19th annotation with someone, through the Jesuit world during COVID and just jumping into it. And so I think it's through the work that I've really grown in my appreciation and personal engagement, not just know what it is academically, but experience it and then try to work from it in a rooted way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Well, let's talk a little bit about your work, because I think many might be aware of the Jesuit website or the AMGG podcast or maybe Eric Clayton's weekly email in our box, those sorts of things. But tell us a little bit about especially the work that you're doing now with the establishment of this new project called the Jesuit Media Lab, which we want to spend some time talking about.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how that came to be, what it is, what you're trying to do with it, and
Sure.
How any listener might benefit from knowing a little bit more about the Jesuit Media Lab.
Yeah. So one thing that really attracted me to this job as a ministry person was that it really didn't have to do a lot of the things that communications people often have to do, which are like putting out fires, like crises. Luckily, we don't deal with crises. If a Jesuit does something stupid and gets in trouble and the press calls, all of the Jesuit provinces around the US and Canada, there are 4 in the US and 1 in Canada, they have to deal with that. The conference is a kind of collaborating organization. So we have no power, we have no say, which is really great. So we don't really do much crisis, occasionally a little bit, not much. And we don't do fundraising either. The provinces fund the existence of the conference. So we just had a lot of flexibility to try different things. There's a few projects that we're expected to do to feature the 20 or 30 Jesuits who are ordained priests each year, or the guys who enter as novices. We do features on them and let the world know about those guys. And we have the website and the social media, but we had a lot of freedom. And the Jesuit who hired me said, think of the work as a playground, which is a great thing for someone to hear from your boss, right?
Yeah, right.
And someone, again, for me, I'm just creative and interested in trying different things. And so it's like, oh, well, we started this podcast right after I got there. We didn't know what we were doing, but it was the barrier to entry on a podcast is not that high, right? You can just kind of start. And if you kind of have a niche, and then you can make your way and you'll find an audience. And so we just started doing that. And we've had an episode every week for over 5 years now without missing, just because we try to keep it kind of lean in our production and just like, let's just have cool conversations with people from around the Jesuit universe, which is so huge, with people of all kinds of different backgrounds. So that was just one example of one of our first projects where we just kind of jumped in, and having a strong team and a lot of leeway just to be like, let's try this, and it's gone well. And so as we were doing something like the podcast, or we send out emails every day in Advent. This year, Steve, you wrote for us, which we appreciated. Our theme was just music this year, Christmas or Advent music, or just songs that are good for the season. And we had 25 different writers contribute to that series. So as we're meeting those people, we started to see, there are all these folks out there who are interested in creative work, especially writing, but also meeting visual artists and podcasters and musicians and videographers who are interested in Ignatian spirituality and creative life, like these things together. And so we saw, why don't we just start bringing these people together? One, kind of sitting where we do as the Jesuit conference, sort of at this hub of all the Jesuit stuff happening, that this is it's a natural place for us, we think, to be a convener.
Right.
And people who are doing this communication work, including yourself, Steve, it's been such a blessing to meet you, someone for whom your spiritual life and creative life feed each other and are really interwoven. And so we started by just hey, we know some people who are good teachers. Let's just put a class together on writing spiritual nonfiction. So people who want to write about their own faith lives, or to write stories about other people's faith experiences or whatever. Let's just offer that course. And great, that went well. And then let's get people together in person for kind of a retreat for creators. So we did that, and that went really well. And so it was just kind of from there, it was okay, there's people who seem to be interested in these connections. I think largely because the creative life can be a kind of lonely one. People who are out and you're working, you're kind of by yourself, and is anyone, maybe you hear back from a reader, or you meet another fellow creative. But we found that there was this hole where the people who were, again, in this space didn't necessarily have ways of connecting with each other in the Ignatian Jesuit place. So we just started hey, let's take some of these ideas of bringing people together and put them in a project. And so hey, let's start a website, because once you have a website, you have to put stuff on it. That makes it real in a way. So it's okay, we've kind of piloted a few of these projects. Let's start a website, and then we'll have to fill that with different offerings to keep it current. And so what we decided on, our main kind of functions within the Jesuit Media Lab, we want to gather, form, and unleash Ignatian creators. So again, people who find their inspiration in Ignatian spirituality. So yeah, we gather people together for prayer, for these in-person things, for online conversations. We form through different courses, whether it's a webinar. We had a kind of an audio storytelling masterclass with an NPR journalist who's a friend of the Jesuits, who kind of talked about how he approaches storytelling. We do those kind of one-shot sessions, and then we have longer 6 or 8 week courses that we run online. And then the hope too is then that the folks who kind of come through and who we meet, then we say unleash, because we publish work that people create. So Steve, you're a great example. You worked on an audio piece for us that we put on our podcast. You've written, we published on our site. And then also we love to see it when people they meet each other through us, and then they are publishing on another place. We have friends from different magazines and websites who are always looking for new contributors. And so I love that. That's the best in the world when someone is publishing the National Catholic Reporter, who we didn't do anything besides bring those people together. But just to see that out there, you see, I think it's building up the kingdom and serving folks.
For your own experience as a writer, as a podcaster, what does it mean, I guess, to be working at the intersection of Ignatian spirituality and creativity, and how do you see the specifics of what you're doing playing into that, and what role does prayer, Ignatian prayer, or any kind of prayer, really play into your work as a creator?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think for us is what we're doing specifically Ignatian. Why should the Jesuit conference be doing this? How is it different than if some other group were doing it? And so I think those are things we like to keep in front of us. And I think there are a number of ways in which the Ignatian spiritual life leads to creativity. Certainly, like you can look at, the imaginative prayer, contemplations, the heart of a lot of the exercises, right? Like the idea that you kind of compose the place, enter into the story yourself, and which at the time that's what I think a lot of it what landed Ignatius in jail, right? He ran into trouble with the Inquisition folks because was saying some things that really kind of challenged the sense that everything has to happen through church, through clergy. He's saying no, that like God can deal directly with God's creatures, with us, and including through ways like the imagination, and so that we can enter into this scripture through our imagination. So right at the heart of that prayer, there's that deep imaginative work, and so then the work that's happening at creativity is kind of participating in that, and kind of the fruits, I think, of prayer. And one of the series we've run on the Media Lab website is called kind of Imagining the Gospel. We ask people to pick a Sunday's gospel, to go into it through Ignatian style prayer, to kind of compose the plays, put themselves into the story, see what they notice, what moves in them, and then from that experience to create out of it. So maybe it's writing a story about one of the side characters from a gospel passage, or maybe it's painting something that comes to them in the story that just stands out, a small detail or a word that comes out of the story and their experience with it. So we try to, again, to kind of root some of the work there. So I would say for sure that the emphasis on the imagination in the Ignatian world is a big piece for us. I think also, that line, finding God in all things, is one that we throw around. It's nice. But what I think in some ways, what it has led to within the Society of Jesus and the Ignatian family is a willingness to engage the culture, right? Like there's not the sense of like, oh, we don't want to look at that or read that because it's not holy, that even if it's something is quote unquote secular, and I use those scare quotes a lot, that is a great place to find God at work. And Jesuits have historically done that, been involved in being creators themselves and in teaching. They say the school play was invented in Jesuit high school, in the first decade. Just seeing that like there is this power in the arts and a way of accessing something divine. And again, to think of all the different, if you want good movie recommendations, talk to Jesuits, because they'll often have seen a lot of things and are kind of plugged into what's going on. And I think there's that sense of, again, looking for the movement of the Spirit in places that are maybe you wouldn't necessarily expect it. But I think for folks in the Ignatian tradition know that that's often where it's found, right? It's in praying that examen, it's going back from my day. Where in my day, including unexpected places, did I encounter the Lord? And that often is in the music and the movies and the books and things that we're taking in. I think especially, again, as people who are as co-creators, created in God's image and likeness, there is that maybe a kind of a privileged way that we connect with the Lord through creative acts, whether our own or when we're consuming or encountering those by another person.
Yeah. I was listening to the AMDG podcast not too long ago, and was it you or Eric who was talking to John Hendricks?
Eric, yeah.
Eric was talking to an incredibly talented artist who's actually here in St. Louis, and I knew him from my days at Washington University. But he was talking about C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien, and especially Tolkien's poem about being sub-creators, right? About being creators, only being able to create because we have first been created by the Creator. And I think that speaks a lot to what we're talking about. And, I think there are folks, even very talented folks, that if you say, what do you do that's creative, they shrink back from that very often. Oh, I'm not creative. What's the place for those folks within Jesuit Media Lab, do you think? Is there stuff? Do people have to feel like they're already accomplished, that they're already working at a pretty high level? Or is there room for those who are just exploring creativity and spirituality to learn something from what's going on in Jesuit Media Lab?
Yeah, I had a ministry mentor in my last job who talked about when you're putting together offerings to think about people in a parish, or in this case, in our internet Ignatian creators family, who are sprinters and marathoners,
Mm.
and maybe middle distance runners as well. But the sense of having things at different lengths and different engagement levels for and again with different audiences in mind. So I would say like one cool thing we've been able to do is I think because of the strength of the Jesuit tradition and all the the educational places and retreat centers, parishes. A lot of people know the Jesuits, and so when I'll approach different authors, say, who have I'm in the library now, and I saw one of the authors we interviewed for the Media Lab out on the featured section here, and so we've done these kind of book club events where we'll interview authors. I was Colm Tobin, whose book Long Island is the one that's featured out on the rack, and poet like a Padraig Tuma, Father Jim Martin has done it for us. So we've had a number of books. So this for folks who are again maybe interested in reading, who then want to come to and hear from the author themselves. So even again coming from that way, if you're not writing but love to read, then that's great. We are in the Easter season going to do a read the whole Divine Comedy in the Easter season with a great theologian professor who is going to guide us through that through the Media Lab. So that's another way, like the idea that in our prayer and spiritual life, even if we're not really making stuff ourselves, to engage with great creative works and then to reflect on them theologically can be a huge boon to your own spiritual life. I think that's a big piece of it for us too, is that sense that like we don't just like read the thing or listen to the thing and then just move on. We want to talk about it, right? We want to do how does this go? How does this connect with my faith at all? Where am I seeing the work of God here? What scripture passage does this remind me of? So to do that theological reflection around the work of that we're engaging is really important for us.
Yeah. We got about 5 minutes or so left. If you have any questions for Mike about anything we've been talking about or about Jesuit Media Lab, please just pop them in the comment section there and we'll see them. Mike, I was thinking, one of the couple of great experiences that I've had in my about a year, I've kind of been involved with the Jesuit Media Lab now, or coming up on it, I guess, but was 2 experiences of play reading. And we did one last Lent during Holy Week with the Final Days of Judas Iscariot, I think was the name of it. And we did one for Advent just not too long ago, a reading of the play The Humans. And, I'm no actor, and a lot of the folks that showed up are not necessarily actors, but they're really interested. Some of them are pretty good actors, actually, but it's a mix of people. We don't study, we don't rehearse, we just show up and read. But what a powerful experience that has been, as you said earlier, to engage with the culture. And I think especially the Final Days of Judas Iscariot was a challenging piece, language-wise, topic-wise, and yet we were, at least my experience, that was very powerful during Holy Week. So, how did those ideas come about, and how do you see that fitting into what you're doing, and do you plan to do more?
Yeah, that's what I love. Like what I love about this job is, again, we find people who bring their whole backgrounds and interests, and then see how they might want to offer those to us, and how could we put them helping them to life. And so, in this case, our friend Renee, who's a theater artist, she's a playwright and has acted, and is also a Catholic worker and a journalist. She's a multi-hyphenate, I think the kids say. We had met her. She was kind of talking about the things she can do, and then pitched that idea of reading a play together. And I've had really powerful experiences in theater over the past few years, and thought like this feels like actually in the Zoom world it could work, right? That you would get people kind of together in a space and do something that you couldn't really do on your own, and something that the internet can facilitate live. That's maybe a little different from just a talking head like myself right now, that this would be a different kind of interactive experience. And so just kind of trusted her, and she's super sharp and deeply, faith-filled person. And so I kind of took it on and led people into it. And yeah, people really, they just jumped at it. And some people said, in that folks who are kind of in more rural areas, like they don't really get theater, at least some of these types of plays near them. And so this was their chance to like participate in it. And that really moved me as well. A chance to, to bring folks together who might not have the opportunity. So yeah, for us, it's all about pilot, like try something, see what gifts are in the community, try it. In that case, it's like a dozen people, right, Steve? We have 15 people. We don't need thousands of people. We need 12 people. Right. And out of that 12, maybe like 4 will come back, and maybe 3 will then like write something for you and then want to do the next thing. And so it just kind of, builds from there. Yeah. So yeah, that was just a real blessing for sure. But maybe
it's a great chance, as you say, not only to participate, but then you kind of invite us to write a reflection of some sort or add to the story in some way, and it gives a jumping off point for some of our own creativity. Hey, we have a question from our Jesuit Media Lab colleague, Christine Eberly. Anything else, Mike, that you're working on writing personally right now that you'd like to share with everybody? What's going on for you?
Well, thanks to Christine. Christine is another one of our JML participants and writes for us and has a book coming out in 2025. So about the Ignatian Camino. So I'll give Christine a shout out. She's a terrific writer, a retreat leader, minister. What am I writing right now? This is like, it's been an interesting time for me. I like think about, my own creative life. But because I'm doing all these cool Media Lab things and thinking, maybe I should try some creative writing, which I've never really done. One piece I'm working on now for America Magazine is a profile of 2 brothers. They're 2 of 8 kids. One of them is Monsignor Ray East. He's a Black Catholic priest here in Washington, D.C., liturgical musician, and a really beautiful person. And one day, my brother, who's a music professor at NYU in New York, he wrote to me and said, "Did you know there's this world famous bass player who has a brother who's a priest?" And I said, "Oh, what, really?" And turned out, I was like, "I've heard of this priest, but I've never heard of the brother." Monsignor Ray's brother, Nathan East, is maybe one of the most recorded bass players of all time and has played with Stevie Wonder and Ringo Starr and George Harrison and Eric Clapton. He's on the song Footloose. So anyway, he's been everywhere and is a deeply faithful guy himself. So I interviewed both of them, and I'm working on so kind of connected to some of these themes, what about their life, their family led them here? How do they see their faith and spiritual and their creative lives kind of intersecting? Interesting thing is this bass player, he got his start playing bass in the Catholic Church in Jesuit Catholic parish in San Diego back in the 60s, 70s. And so it's been so that'll be a cool story that'll come out later this spring.
Oh, nice. Look forward to that. Yeah. We just got to thank you from Peggy McAuliffe, thanking us for building up the kingdom. So, and Happy New Year, which seems like a pretty good way to end. So just wanted to say we're going to be here again in February with Mike's colleague, Eric Clayton. So from the conference, Eric is also the author of 2 books, Cannonball Moments, which I read this past fall, and I think it's a newer book called My Life with the Jedi. So, which is kind of about the spirituality of Star Wars. So, which he sent to me, and I haven't read yet, but I'm going to get into it.
Eric gets all the sci-fi fantasy stuff. So when Tolkien and Lewis came up, he jumped on that one. I let him have those. So he's a huge devotee of that whole world.
We're going to be a week later than normal because of some travel on my part. So on Valentine's Day, Friday, February 14th at noon, I'll be right here with Eric Clayton. So mark your calendars for that. Mike Jordan Laskey, thank you very much for tuning in on a day off, I know, and sitting in that beautiful public library there.
Montgomery County, Maryland. That's right.
That's right. Well, thank you. And I'll be talking to you soon about some other things. Please remember that we're here. Remember that these conversations can now be listened to as podcasts. We can check that out, and we'll put some more information on our Facebook page about that. So I think that's it. Thank you very much. I'm Steve Givens from the Bridges Foundation signing off. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thanks, Steve. Happy New Year.
All right. Thanks.
Right.
Hold on just a minute, Mike.
Yeah.